1 month after my daughter's wedding, I was still living inside a version of my life that I believed was solid and complete. I was 62 years old, a man who had spent more than 40 years building a hardware business from a single struggling store into a profitable regional chain. I lived in a large house in Paradise Valley, paid my taxes, supported my family, and believed that constant sacrifice was simply the price of being a good father. I thought stability meant success, and silence meant peace. That I was wrong. The first crack appeared with a phone call on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The wedding photographer, a woman named Rachel Moore, spoke carefully, as if each word might break something fragile. She asked me to come to her studio alone and insisted that I not tell my daughter, whom I will call Anna. She said she had discovered something in the wedding photographs that she could not ignore and that I deserved to see for myself. From the moment I hung up, a heavy sense of unease followed me. The next morning, I stood behind Rachel in her editing room as images from the wedding filled the large screen. At first, everything looked perfect. Smiling guests, elegant decorations, expensive details that reflected the money and effort I had invested. I remembered standing at the ceremony, watching Anna walk down the aisle, feeling proud and exhausted, convinced that every sacrifice had been worth it. Then Rachel opened another folder. These photographs had been taken 2 hours before the ceremony. Through a glass window on the restaurant terrace, I saw Anna's husband, Michael, still wearing his tuxedo, kissing another woman. It was not awkward or uncertain. It was intimate, confident, and familiar. His body language showed no hesitation, no guilt, no confusion. Rachel showed me timestamps, location data, and multiple angles of the same moment. There was no doubt. No explanation could change what I was seeing. I left the studio with a flash drive in my pocket and a hollow pressure growing in my chest. Michael had betrayed my daughter before their marriage had even begun. But what haunted me more than the affair itself was a question that refused to leave my mind. Why go through with the wedding at all? I did not have to wait long for the answer. Later that same day, I returned home earlier than usual and heard my younger daughter, whom I will call Lily, talking loudly on the phone upstairs. She did not know I was there. Her voice was relaxed, amused, careless. She told Anna that the marriage was temporary and that Michael had already agreed to divorce her in a few months. They were just waiting to collect the wedding gifts first. Lily laughed about how easy the money would be. Anna spoke calmly and strategically, explaining how my financial support would make everything simpler. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening as my daughters discussed their plans as if they were negotiating a business contract. They spoke about me without affection or guilt, referring to me as if I were a predictable resource. In that moment, the illusion of my family collapsed completely. Suddenly, everything made sense. Anna's casual request for a large down payment on a house. Lily and her unemployed boyfriend Eric living rent-free in my guest house for years, treating my home like a permanent entitlement. Every demand, every smile, every assumption had been calculated. I was not their father in their eyes. I was their safety net. That night, sleep was impossible. I replayed old conversations and moments I had ignored. I remembered how often I had confused dependence with love. By morning, my decision was clear. I contacted a lawyer. Within days, eviction notices were prepared, and my assets were transferred into an irrevocable trust. My house, my business, and my savings were legally protected. When I served the eviction notice to Lily and Eric, their reactions followed a familiar pattern: anger, tears, accusations, promises of change. I listened without emotion. Anna tried a different approach. She came to my house with Michael and suggested that I sell my property, move somewhere smaller, and share the proceeds for the good of the family. That evening, I placed printed photographs from the wedding on the table and told them I knew everything: the affair, the planned divorce, the intention to divide the wedding money. The truth drained the color from their faces. The days that followed were tense and hostile. Whispered conversations, slammed doors, emotional manipulation. I documented everything. 15 days later, a sheriff escorted Lily and Eric out of my house. They left with bags of clothes and shattered confidence. Anna stopped calling soon after. Michael later sent me a message offering money in exchange for my silence. I deleted it without replying. For the first time in years, my house was quiet. The silence did not feel lonely. It felt honest. I drank my coffee on the terrace each morning and watched the desert wake up. I began guitar lessons, volunteered my time, and learned to enjoy days without demands or manipulation. I finally understood that love does not mean endless sacrifice, and that protecting yourself is not cruelty. That I did not lose my family that month. I lost an illusion, and in return, I gained my life back. That I began traveling, first to small towns I had always driven past without thought, then to cities I had only seen in magazines. Each trip was a small rebellion against the life I had once believed was fixed and inevitable. I walked through museums without checking my watch. I lingered in cafes reading books that had nothing to do with business. And I spoke with strangers who had no interest in what I could provide or protect. That I in the evenings, I returned home to my quiet house, but the silence was no longer empty. It was a companion, a reminder that I had chosen my own life. The guitar lessons became more than a hobby. They were a meditation, a dialogue with myself that had been silenced for too long. I discovered melodies I did not know I could play, songs that felt like confessions and promises. At one point one afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Inside, a simple note. You have been brave in ways I could never understand. Keep your heart open. No signature. No return address. I smiled, realizing that courage, once it has been claimed, attracts acknowledgement in mysterious ways. That I began to meet people who had lived lives unburdened by manipulation or expectation. Old friends I had not spoken to in years, neighbors I had ignored, fellow travelers whose paths had intersected with mine by chance. Each encounter reminded me that relationships could exist without calculation, without obligation, and that trust was something earned, not extracted. For the first time, I understood that life was not a ledger of debts and sacrifices. It was a canvas, and I held the brush. And in the quiet of my home, in the soft strum of my guitar, in the open road that stretched ahead, I finally felt the kind of freedom that comes not from escape, but from truth. I began keeping a journal, not for anyone else, but for myself, a record of mornings spent in sunlight, of music learned and mistakes embraced. I planted a small garden on the terrace, watching stubborn desert flowers bloom where I had not expected life to thrive. Each seed was a quiet promise. Growth was possible, even after decades of neglect. Sometimes I thought of Anna and Lily, but the thoughts were no longer bitter. They were reminders of what I had endured and overcome. I understood now that love is not measured by sacrifice alone, and that self-respect is the foundation upon which any meaningful connection must stand. With each passing day, I felt lighter, more present, more alive. The house was no longer a fortress. It was a home. The silence was no longer lonely. It was honest. And in that honesty, I finally found peace.